Well,
That's a loaded political question.
no, I mean, it's not a loaded political question. I'm not even sure that the issues are well ventilated so that we know that it's a political problem. There is an enormous amount of misunderstanding about this question of energy security, an enormous amount of misinformation. And is it politically generated? No, I don't know that it's politically generated. I think what contributes to it is the competing claims of the players who don't want competition for one reason or another. But let me give you some examples of the disinformation. The response over the weekend on the talk shows, because we have these two things happening at the same time, which is a marvelous opportunity for teaching. We have what was going on and still is going on in Libya, which is causing great volatility in the price of oil internationally, and the price is set internationally. And that's what is causing our gasoline prices to approach $4 a gallon. And then we have this horrible tragedy in Tokyo, in Japan, which has destroyed the bulk of Japan's nuclear industry and endangers really any growth in nuclear around the world. I mean, we're not going to have, maybe it's possible in California you could have an 8.9 earthquake, but that's not a possibility really for the rest of the continental United States. But never mind, it's going to endanger any future growth of nuclear. And I had breakfast with a European this morning who tells me that Germany has already decided to pull the plug on any expansion, even before they've assessed whether or not there are earthquake possibilities in Germany. So the nuclear industry is really endangered, which may not be a bad thing. I'm just pointing it out. In the United States, our nuclear industry was already deeply endangered by the development of this gas revolution, natural gas revolution, where the prices are making nuclear power plants just not economical to build. So I'm not sure that Japan has actually done much more than this natural gas revolution had already done. But people were confusing all of these things. People were saying, "Oh my God, nuclear is gone. Now we have to find. It's going to raise oil prices." No, nuclear doesn't provide transportation fuel. I suppose if we had a lot of electric cars, nuclear energy could. But at the moment, nuclear it drives our aircraft carriers, but it doesn't drive our cars, and it's never going to drive our cars. So that isn't. We are independent, say, as contrasted with Europe. Our electricity generation is totally homegrown. We don't import any inputs for electricity. It's all coal, or our own nuclear, or our own natural gas, or our own wind, or solar, or geothermal, or water. We don't import anything. In Hawaii, they have to import a little oil. But in the continental United States, we don't import anything that generates electricity. So when you hear people say, "Oh my God, we got to have wind and solar because we need to get energy independent," no, not for energy independence we don't. We're not going to put windmills on our cars. Windmills aren't going to drive our cars. And I don't think we're ever going to really have solar panel cars. It's good for climate change to have this because it backs out coal, which is pretty dirty, and natural gas, which is not so dirty, but still got CO2, 40% of coal. It's cleaner than coal, but not clean, not totally clean. So it's good to have it, but don't say it's because of energy security, is all I'm saying. On the other hand, the response to Libya and to what's going on in Bahrain, and God, the Saudis, going into Bahrain is a scary thing, a very scary thing. They sent troops in. Just invaded the country yesterday. It didn't get big headlines in part because the Japanese tragedy is sort of overpowering everything. But this is a huge problem. But the solution to it is not going to be found in drill, baby, drill for more oil in the United States. We can find a lot more oil, and that would be good for the areas where the oil is found. It's good for jobs. It's good for the producers. It's good. It's something that ought to happen if it can be done consistently with the environment, but it's not going to solve our oil dependency problem because the increased U.S. production is not going to be big enough to dramatically alter the world price. That's set as an international commodity. The way to get energy independence is to find products that do not have their price linked and their future linked to oil. And because of the great discoveries in this country and elsewhere in the world of this gas shale, gas is now delinked. The price isn't linked to the price of oil. Biofuels not linked. Electric cars not linked. Coal to liquids not linked to oil. These are independent. So a gas car, a natural gas car in Oklahoma can get you gas at $1.40 a gallon. It's not linked to the price of oil. That's what we want to do, is develop those products that are totally homegrown, that don't depend and aren't held hostage by what goes on in Libya, or what goes on in Saudi Arabia, or what goes on in OPEC. And we can do that. But we got to clear up the confusion. It's very hard to have a debate about this if people don't understand the difference between electricity, which is not an oil dependency problem, and transportation, which is. It's transportation that causes our dependency problem, not electricity. And that's a very, very fundamental point. Yes?
Boyden, I wanted to, first of all, I don't know how many people in the room know this, but Boyden Gray, when he was with the Reagan White House, actually led the way on eliminating lead in gasoline, and I wanted to commend you for that courageous, and really ended up, I mean, President Reagan is the one who finally decided to eliminate lead in gasoline. We forget that today. We forget that Reagan led the way, and Boyden, you're to be credited for the leadership on that. I really mean that. And today you've said something very special in talking about EPA needing to do more regulating, which is counterintuitive and certainly counter to everything that we're hearing today. I happen to agree with what you've said, but what chances do we get of breaking through politically on that kind of thing? Can we get the lawmakers to understand that sometimes what's hard to do is actually the best thing to do for our nation's future? And what do you think the chances are of getting them to see that?
Well, we have to raise the level of the debate. Now, it is counterintuitive, especially coming from me. You all don't know me as well as, you know, I'm not a regulator. I'm not known for running around ginning up regulation. So he says, what is this guy doing, you know? And sometimes the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which otherwise likes me, looks at me on these issues and says, what is wrong with you? Where did you go off the rails, you know? But it's a zero-sum game, this Clean Air Act. And if you're not going to repeal it, which we are not going to do, we have the cleanest air probably in the world. It could be cleaner, but it's very, very clean. And it's one of the great resources we have in this country. We're not going to repeal the statute. You wouldn't put up with it. There's not a member of the Tea Party who would say, hey, let's repeal the Clean Air Act. I don't think any Tea Party person would say that. So if we're not going to repeal it, we might as well get on with it. And the pollutants, and this is directly related to lead, the pollutants, when lead was phased out, what was the substitute? Lead was a very, very bad poison. To go back to put it in context, it's, to me, a fascinating story of the origins of our auto and oil industries. But when the industry was getting going, two industries were getting going, at the early part of the last century, there was a problem with engine knock. You don't have to worry about it because we solved it, partly. But lead was the thing that was put in the gasoline, discovered by Kettering, Sloan Kettering Institute, great GM inventor. He discovered it. He had an assistant named Midgley. They both came out of Dayton. They were hired by General Motors. Midgley was his assistant. Midgley was a Brit. Midgley is responsible for discovering both lead and chlorofluorocarbons, which we had to phase out because of the stratospheric ozone hole. Now that's quite an accomplishment, to have invented or discovered the two greatest industrial poisons of the 20th century. And his name was Midgley. All right, quite a good job. Midgley did a great job. So they discovered lead. They put lead in, but it turns out to be highly toxic. There was actually a huge refinery explosion in 1918 or something like that in New Jersey. It killed a lot of people. Today, that would have been the end of lead, but in those days, they were able to cover it up. So it takes another 30, 40 years to get back to it. We had to phase it out. But what was going to be the substitute? And it turns out the substitute is almost as bad. And the substitute are highly toxic elements that are the biggest single polluters of the remaining pollution that we have in our country. They're called aromatics. They're very, very bad actors. And you can take it out much more cheaply than you can do a lot of other things. If we don't clean up the gasoline and diesel of the pollution which they cause, the air quality officials in your states and in your cities have to get the same reductions that cost 10 or 20 times as much from your local laundromats, from your local small business. They have to get these reductions because they have to come in compliance. And the reductions they're getting kill a lot more jobs than taking this low-hanging fruit, as it were, out of the gasoline and diesel. So that's why I say more is less in the long run. You go after the really bad stuff, clean it up, and that may be the end. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency does not want pure air. Do you know why this is so? Because then they have nothing left to do. If all of our air is pristine, what is there left to do? I'm a lawyer. I grew up in the South, came from a family of lawyers on my mother's side, going back almost 200 years. God bless the man who sues my client. If you're a lawyer, you understand that. God bless the man who sues my client. One lawyer in a small town will starve, but two lawyers in a small town will do very, very well. So you need problems, and EPA needs problems, and EPA doesn't want to solve all the problems tomorrow. Let's put that off a while because we lose our jobs. So I'm actually in favor of working EPA out of a job, or at least out of some jobs, because I think we can actually completely clean our air and put them out of business in certain lines of business. And that's my goal in life, is to get the air so clean, there's no reason to have EPA in certain lines of work.